Earlier in this video series, I had two separate videos, one video on nouns and the other video on pronouns. In this video, I would like to review the difference between nouns and pronouns. Nouns are people, places, and things. There are common nouns and there are proper nouns. There are also singular nouns and plural nouns. This first sentence here does not have any plural nouns in it, but don't worry, we will talk about those later. Ryan drove to Thunder Bay in the summer to see the city and visit with family. So the nouns are Ryan, Thunder Bay, summer, city, family. This is a good opportunity to remind you of the difference between proper nouns and common nouns. Proper nouns are specific. In this case, we have a specific person and we have a specific place. Ryan, Thunder Bay. Common nouns are just general. It could be any city. It could be any family. It could be any summer. Summer, city, family. An important thing to remember is that summer, which is a season, is not capitalized. Right? So do not capitalize any of the seasons. So if you have the words spring, summer, fall, autumn, winter, those are all seasons and they do not need capitals. Probably the most important thing to remember for this video is that pronouns are not the same as nouns. Pronouns are used instead of nouns. Let me just read this sentence. He enjoyed the trip because it was nice at that time of year, and his family was happy to see him. For this example, there are some nouns in the sentence, but I wanted to underline only the pronouns so that you could see them easily. Let's compare the two sentences so that I can explain the difference between nouns and pronouns. So remember, the first sentence has nouns in it. Right? Ryan drove to Thunder Bay in the summer to see the city and visit with family. Now this second sentence, I've underlined pronouns, right? He enjoyed the trip because it was nice at that time of year, and his family was happy to see him. So with pronouns, it really helps if you've used a noun right before you use a pronoun. So you notice how in this first sentence I talk about Ryan. I just mentioned him. So when I use the pronoun he, it makes sense because I know who he is. I just mentioned that he is Ryan. So Ryan is a proper noun and he is not a noun at all. He is a pronoun that's being used instead of a noun. And we look at this pronoun it. It can be tricky, but we know what it is. We know what we're talking about. We're talking about Thunder Bay and the trip that he took, right? So he enjoyed the trip because it was nice at that time of year. What was nice? Thunder Bay was nice at that time of year. Then I've got a couple of other pronouns that make sense with this situation. His family was happy to see him. That makes sense, right? If he visited with his family, they'd probably, well, hopefully be happy to see him. So his and him are pronouns too. So again, the pronouns in my example are he, it, his, him. I just wanted to give you a list of nouns, and I will use these in sentences later, but just notice that nouns can be concepts. They don't necessarily have to be things that we can touch, right? Remember, nouns are people, places, and things. But a thing could be something like time, happiness, confusion, or beauty, or even a celebration. I mean, can you really touch a celebration? It's something that you could be a part of, but it's different than, say, a kitten or water, things that you can touch. And sunset, you can see a sunset. You can't really touch a sunset though, right? So there are a lot of nouns that are possible, especially when we think of different things. Proper nouns are specific, like I mentioned before. In this chart, I made up some nouns, I made up some names, and I thought of some places and a body of water. Dr. Quartz, Mrs. Diamond, Frank, Katie, Lake Superior, Webequie, Thunder Bay Art Gallery, New Year's. So you notice proper nouns are always capitalized. And then, just as I promised, a few examples of the difference between singular nouns and plural nouns. Earlier in the video series, I also explained plural nouns, and I gave some really good examples, and I went through some of the rules for what you do to the endings when you make singular nouns into plural nouns. But here are some just for example. You could have one doctor or several doctors, one wife, several wives, one man, several men, one woman, several women, one bush, several bushes, one scarf, several scarves, one painting, several paintings, one party, several parties. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just want to show you that it's here. This is a chart with the different pronouns. So you could have a singular pronoun like I. I is always just you, and you are only one person. And you could have plural pronouns like we. We would be you plus at least one other person. It could be you and one more person, or you and several other people. So pronouns could be singular, one, or plural, more than one. As I promised, let's finish off with some example sentences. Please note that the nouns are in orange and the pronouns are in blue. One thing that can be confusing when we use pronouns is that it's possible to have nouns and pronouns in the same sentence. I do have one sentence at the very end, and maybe I'll skip ahead to that sentence, where I have nouns in the first sentence and then pronouns in the second sentence. So this is my fourth set of sentences here. So let's just look at 4A. The sunset in Webequie was beautiful. So my nouns are sunset, Webequie. 4B. I was very lucky to see it. So the pronouns are I, it. So I was just trying to think of an example using the pronoun I, right? So if someone was reading this, they might say, "Oh, well, you must have been to Webequie, right? If you're saying that you were very lucky to see it." And it, of course, is talking about the sunset, specifically the sunset in Webequie. And because we just mentioned the sunset in Webequie, it's obvious what it is. Okay, let's go through the first three sets. So 1A and B. 1A just has nouns in it. Dr. Quartz is better because other doctors are not as easy to talk to. The nouns are Dr. Quartz, doctors. 1B has two nouns and two pronouns in it. Remember, pronouns are not the same thing as nouns. They're completely different. They're used instead of nouns. 1B, next time I will make an appointment to see him instead. And that's a tricky pronoun. Just remember, I is always a pronoun. So we've got the nouns are time, appointment, and the pronouns, I want to highlight the pronouns here, are I and him. And we know because we just mentioned Dr. Quartz, that when we say him, when we use the pronoun him, that we're talking about Dr. Quartz, but instead of saying his name and using a noun, we're using the pronoun him. Second set of sentences. 2a. Mrs. Diamond is a new wife with a lot of happiness. So we've got 3 nouns. Mrs. Diamond, a specific person. Wife, it's just could be any wife, it's just a common noun. Happiness, that's a thing, it's a concept. 3 nouns. Then in the second sentence we have 1 noun, and it's actually a plural noun, and then 2 pronouns. The other wives wish that they were happy like her. So because we just mentioned Mrs. Diamond, we know that her is referring to Mrs. Diamond because we just said her name. So that's who she is, right? When we say her, that's who we mean. And our noun wives is plural, more than 1 wife, several wives. The other wives wish that they were happy like her. So instead of this group of wives, we're using the pronoun they. And instead of Mrs. Diamond, we're using her. Okay, third set of sentences. 3a, 3 nouns. Frank was confused when Katie decided not to pet the kitten. So we have Frank, Katie, kitten. 3b, she forgot to tell him about her allergies. Well, we know because we just mentioned Katie, that she is being used instead of Katie. And we also just mentioned Frank, so we know that him is being used instead of Frank. And it makes sense that if we're talking about her allergies, we're talking about Katie's allergies, right? So we have 3 pronouns, she, him, her, and 1 noun, allergies, which is also a plural noun. Well, I hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to the next one.